Hey there, welcome to Empower with Angela T. Moore. Remember, every time I do the show, I interview medical and mental health professionals, experts in wellness and prevention, activists and advocates, educators and motivators to help you live an empowered life. Today, in recognition of Black History Month, I will be discussing the state of staffing in the African American community, the Black experience from a white perspective, Black entrepreneurship, as well as barriers to success, and how home health can assist Black families in achieving their health and wellness goals. Let me tell you something about my first guest. My first guest, Kim Knight, is the current president of Team 84 Staffing. In this role, Kim manages client accounts, assisting growth and development with staff, as well as the overall firm, expanding from securing business to managing projects and participating in internal budgeting. Her team works with clients on employee engagement, motivation, leadership, executive promotion, and more. Welcome to Empower, Kim. How are you doing today?
I am good, Angela. How are you?
I am blessed. What can I say?
Good.
So, Kim, can you tell the listening audience a little bit more about yourself beyond the bio that I just gave?
Well, thank you for that introduction. I came into the staffing world by happenstance. I
Mm,
actually started at General Motors as a contract employee. So I am going out truly to retire.
mm,
As this is my last position, I would hope, um, in the staffing arena, helping individuals. I started at GM, was supposed to be there 2 weeks, and 20 years later, uh, I excelled. So I think where I am now is all about giving individuals an opportunity and helping them to understand that temporary doesn't mean just temporary when it comes to
mm,
staffing.
Very interesting. I've had the opportunity to talk with you on a few occasions, and ironically, we've never talked much about staffing. So, what can you say now about the current state of staffing post-pandemic? And I don't even know if I can say post-pandemic because we're all kind of still in pandemic mode, quite
Right.
frankly.
Well, Angela, pre-COVID, it
Hmm.
was a different mentality and culture. Now, with the increased number of opportunities that are available, and the qualities of certain companies where they're lowering their standards of individuals being able to post for those like positions, is very competitive. It's
Hmm.
competitive financially, when it comes to incentives. It's a lot of factors that are put into the room now, and you're competing with individuals that you wouldn't normally compete with for particularly a lot of the light industrial opportunities that are paying between 14 and 16, $17 an hour.
Now, interestingly, I have the opportunity, as you know, I'm a licensed therapist, and I have the opportunity,
Yes.
ironically, to counsel a lot of people that are in the business world, employees as well as business owners. And what's interesting is to hear this perspective from the business owner. I mean, to understand the experience of the business owner and also to understand the experience of the employee. Now, from the
Mhm.
business owner perspective, what they're finding and what they are saying is that their employees aren't motivated to stay. They're dealing with situations where accountability they feel like has kind of gone out the window. And then employees are feeling like they've grown, they've changed a lot through the pandemic, but most importantly, that they've grown and they want the business owners to be aware of that growth and to integrate it into their new roles post pandemic. So, my question to you is from a business perspective, what are you hearing are the challenges and obstacles that they're trying to overcome? And then follow that up with what is the employee experience? So, what are you hearing from employees as they go to these different companies and organizations?
Yeah, and you're right. The staffing agency, we hear from both ends.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the pre-COVID, and like you said, we're still in the midst of COVID, but when they did the actual closing down of everything, when they closed down, the average light industrial pay salary was somewhere in the ballpark of 12 to 12.50. The
Mm-hmm.
average now is 16 to 16.25 an hour.
Okay.
Now the quality of individuals has not rose to that same level of pay. if from an employer perspective, because employers are now they're in such a dire need. They're taking what they can get. All they want employees to do, and I hear some of them tell us all the time, as long as they'll get here and stay. That's not what we used to hear. It used to be these standards and qualifications and accountability. And the employers are kind of now softening back because employees have so many options. They can go right next door. So attrition is very high. It's because the demand for individuals to work is so great.
Mm-hmm.
But
So
on
what
the
do you
flip,
say? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
but I'm just saying on the flip side, I found that it's not just money. It's the culture of the atmosphere that is keeping some of the individuals where they are. I've had them where they take a little bit less because they like the atmosphere. They feel appreciated. They feel part of a team, especially when you come from a staffing environment, because you're actually working for, in my case, you'll be working for Team 84 staffing, and you might be at company A. If company A makes you feel like you're a part of the team, people are more likely to stay in that type of environment, because we can get you there, but we can't keep you there.
Now, I feel like I have a better understanding of the employee perspective, but what would you say to the employer, the business owner, that wants to try to attract talent and keep the talent that they attract?
Okay. It what I do as a staffing agency, I do exit interviews. Those exit interviews help me to help my customer to identify the red X. Why are they losing the candidates or good employees? Sometimes it can be staff, personnel. It can be just a lot of times it just narrows down to the culture of incentives. They want to be treated fairly. They want to be treated with more respect. But from an employer's perspective, also, it's kind of hard. You're in a hard spot because they're giving up more money.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting less quality or not as great quality as they're used to, because they feel like they've lowered their standards because they just need a body to satisfy their suppliers or to get the job done on their end.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we as a company are very adamant in ensuring that we get those exit interviews. They have proved to be so beneficial to
Mm-hmm.
understand, because internally the people that need to hear it, it doesn't usually get to those individuals. But if
Mm-hmm.
our employees tell us, it kind of gives, not saying that it holds a lot of weight, but it does raise rise to some of the issues that are happening, because most companies have more than one staffing agency. So if they're hearing the
Mm-hmm.
same tone, they kind of take that and they run with it in a way in which, whether it's from management, it's culture, they try to do a lot of things like different incentives, attendance bonuses, and things of that nature to keep individuals around.
You know, it's interesting. You said exit interview, and when I think about that, that's gathering information, which is, important for an organization to understand why their employee is leaving.
Yes.
I wonder how many organizations understand the importance of almost like an entrance interview, a maintenance interview, understanding why the employee decided to come to your organization and make it their home, um, assess how they're doing, as they're working. What are your thoughts about that?
You hitting it head on, Angela. Our recruiters, we send an employee to a position. Part of our standard practice is the first 24 hours, the recruiter touches base. How was your day? How did it go? Do you like the atmosphere? What do you like? What do you don't like? We share that information too when I talk to the customer, because I'm very interactive with our customers, and I call them partners because that's what we truly are. When they
Mm-hmm.
excel, we excel. We want them to be successful. So I tell them the news is not always negative. It's good news. I let them know what's working. And you're right. And back in my GM days, we that was adamant. How are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing right? What are you doing wrong? How can you improve? But that
Mm-hmm.
steady conversation that we have with our candidates helps us to help our customers be better customers, and it helps us to reduce the attrition when it comes to keeping an individual on a job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly, some time ago, I did a lot of research and I looked at organizations in the United States and ironically in Australia. And
Hmm.
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting. They had, basically like 5 distinct ways that they did business. Like during the pandemic, they called it the hub and spoke. There was like the hybrid, and there were different structures that
Mm-hmm.
the organizations developed as they had to adapt to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I wonder about those organizations that do the hub and spoke, that do the hybrid, that do the satellite office, and now they're bringing their employees back maybe to one central location. I imagine they're going to have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of challenges with that, because if you were able to say work from home, if you were able to go to a satellite office that was closer to your home, if you were able to, like, one of the things that was really popular in Australia was that people that were in a particular area, they had the opportunity to work with people from that area, and so they didn't
Okay.
have to necessarily travel to a central location that maybe was 45 minutes away. They were able to go to a location that maybe was 10 minutes away. And
Mm-hmm.
so now that that employees were able to, well, I'll say this, had to make adjustments, and the organizations had to make an adjustments. And now as you're coming back, a lot of those adjustments that were nice and
Right.
appreciated employees are now going to be removed. So what do you say to the employee that is a little frustrated that they have to go back to work as usual?
Oh, we're getting it all the time. Every time we call, oh, well, you know what? You talk to them. Oh, I want a job that we can work from at home, or we can. I tell them. I says, you know what? We were in the midst of a pandemic. We
Mhm.
had to do, and companies and employers had to do what they needed to do for the moment to work. That can't be reality. Not in
Mhm.
every instance. It's because every job doesn't allow you the flexibility to be at home for that extensive period of time.
Mhm.
And I think that from an employer perspective, a lot of employers kind of shifted and they did some things to make it more attractive. Not that the employee is seeing anything that they should have been able to come back to what they left. But
Mhm.
the employer understands that these employees got comfortable at home. They're great employees. Excuse me. They're great employees and they want to have something to attract them to come back into the office.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, excuse me, Angela.
No, that's
So,
okay.
so I think that,
Yeah,
so I
take your
think that, yeah, give me some water here.
time.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So I think that employers have gotten creative
Mhm.
in having their employees to come back to something different. And
Mhm.
again, it goes back to those incentives and they did gradual approach. They start coming back once a day, twice a day. And I've seen that has actually worked.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I've had the opportunity to talk with a lot of different people from different industries, and I hear different things. I hear some people say, well, I really loved working from home because I felt like I was able to get more accomplished. I didn't have to commute back and forth to work. I didn't have to get dressed. I didn't have
Right.
to different things like that. Some people also too, if they have other responsibilities of children, or perhaps they're caring for a parent, they felt like it made it a little easier. But then on the same, and I also will say that I heard also that people didn't like working from home, and they're very eager to go back. But regardless, people are coming back to work, and organizations are going to have to do their part to make their employees comfortable and ready for this new environment, this new culture that is going to be very different from the culture that they had pre-pandemic. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, what were you going to say?
Exactly. And you know what? And the interesting thing, Angela, when they're coming back, they're asking for more.
Mm-hmm.
They look at daycare as an issue because the daycares were closed, so they were at home and they kind of adjusted and made themselves life at home at work. So now, like you say, it's a big adjustment. It's like they got to get up, and now it's an inconvenience. I've seen in my workplace, not in Team 84, we in the building. There's other companies in our building. They lost a lot of people once they came back to work because they just didn't want to.
Now, I want to think about something. Let's pause for a second here.
Mm-hmm.
So now you think about yourself when you worked at GM. You said your intention was just to be there for a very short time. And then 20 years later,
Yes.
it wasn't until 20 years later when you decided to go on a different path. And now
Yes.
you are here at Team 84. Now, if you can go back and you can think about the person that you were when you worked for GM, or if you were an employee at that time and you went through a pandemic and literally 2.5 years or 3 years, the life at GM was drastically different. Okay. How do
Yes.
you think that would have impacted you? And can you understand the different feelings that people are sharing about their experience?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I probably, if I was at GM, and GM is one that still has a lot of individuals working from home, I think I would be in the same, honestly, I probably would be in the same position. I would probably want to stay home
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of what you were doing and what I was doing there, aside from meeting, was at a desktop.
Mm-hmm.
I could do the same exact thing at home. And that's why some employers found that their employees are more efficient being at
Mm-hmm.
home and they're not being interrupted. You're not walking they call it the water cooler talk. They're not going to the
Okay.
water cooler. They're not walking around. Because when you work from home, and we worked from home, Team 84 did for just a short time, but we were considered an essential worker. But I found myself working more because there was no interruption. There was no lunchtime. So time didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think if I was at GM now, I probably would feel a little reluctant to come back into the office also, because it
Mm-hmm.
would have to be a very great conversation to measure the statistics on my work performance. If it didn't reduce, why do I have to come back in?
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Mm-hmm.
if I was doing something, my job description entailed me to come back in, or we have to do face-to-face meetings, that's different. We can just have it where I can come in. But at GM, if I was at GM, now I can't even envision not being into the office, because in an entrepreneur perspective, it's something about having that touchy feely upfront face-to-face with your employees and with your
Mm-hmm.
candidates when you're interviewing. But to your question, if I was at GM, I probably would be one of them that would want to stay home.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. You got spoiled with it. It's not
Yeah.
like if my performance didn't reduce, I would probably want to stay home.
Yeah. I can understand that. As you know, I'm a licensed therapist, and I have clients, ironically, that want to come to the office, and then I have those clients that want to stay home, and
Mm-hmm.
I can see the benefit of both. So it's very interesting to hear everyone's experience, perspective, on how they've been impacted by the pandemic, personally and professionally,
Mm-hmm.
as well as I think what they've learned about themselves during the time in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. Understanding that I am more effective if I don't have to deal with distractions at work. If I don't if I don't have to stop to talk with a coworker, that I'm able to get much more work done. But now it's something that I definitely want to take time to talk about, and I think it's really, really important. As you know, February is Black History Month, and
Yes.
ironically, the theme for this year is actually health and wellness. Um, and I want to talk about two things. One, there's been a lot of talk about how Blacks, African Americans, people of color have been impacted by the pandemic. And
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that being of your, significant role in staffing, you are seeing um, and talking with people of many different ethnic backgrounds.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I want to ask you, what do you feel is the issue that people are talking about so much as it relates to African Americans in terms of disparities, racial disparities, inequities, things like that. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts on in the last 3 months, the last 3 month report on unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
Every race, when it came to unemployment, declined except for the African American race. And I think that alludes to the lack of college degrees. So I try to partner with companies or corporations that do internal training,
Mm-hmm.
that don't mind an individual who has the will to want to learn, that just haven't had that education on the job training. Because coming from a single parent background, and like I say, I started off in a staffing arena, and salary was way lower than what it is now. But my goal wasn't education at that time. That was not my first forethought. I was a
Mm-hmm.
young mother. All I was thinking about is putting food on the table. That
Mm-hmm.
became a priority. So if they can get into somewhere, work, and also get trained to where they can grow and excel, I think that's what we need more of.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, to kind of break away from the traditional go to college, don't work, and then if we can have more on the job training, like we got an employer that they can start off as a machine operator and train into a CNC operator. That's a $3 difference, sometimes a $4
Mm-hmm.
difference. Or
Okay.
yeah, they can start off at one position and become a team lead, but there's things that they are growing and they're becoming a skill trade or a skill set within that job. I think if we have more of that, employers giving opportunities to individuals who are not as required as qualified, I'm sorry, but has the know-it-all to learn more, I think we'll
Mm-hmm.
get more of those African Americans in these positions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just think that sometimes we get caught up in the traditional regime of a bachelor's, and I've got a nephew that graduated, and all I know is education the traditional way. I had a conversation with him, and it was evident that education, college, isn't for everybody. But he wanted to be successful. He has the know-it-all to do something. So he's actually working at a company through us where he's gotten trained, and he'll soon be a skilled trade very soon.
Mm-hmm.
But he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do hands-on. So I think that's an area that we need to do better at,
Mm-hmm.
doing
Yeah.
on-site training.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think oftentimes, as a minority, sometimes you only do what you know or what you've seen and
Yes.
observed and what's been your experience. And as we evolve as a people, I think we have to also evolve in terms of our expectations and understanding that we are multifaceted, we're multidimensional, I said we have many colors to us, beyond the fact that we're quote unquote Black.
Yes.
And I think that an organization would really benefit by helping their employees identify their many different colors, their many different perspectives, there are many different, potential areas of growth. And interestingly, when I was doing my research on businesses and organizations, that was something that I found. Those organizations that actually created learning opportunities for the
Mm-hmm.
employees within the company, either
Mm-hmm.
creating a school or a program where they could learn, or having a program that was affiliated with a school, where they sent
Mm-hmm.
their people,
Okay.
that those employees were happier and better employees because if they didn't need to go outside of an organization to grow. They were able to grow within the organization. And what was interesting is it wasn't necessary always to provide movement up. It was also valued actually and much appreciated if you provided movement across. So you could be in the
Yes.
same, yeah, earn the same amount, similar role, but maybe you're doing something slightly different.
Mm-hmm. That's what, and that's what I say, Angela, because it feels like you're invest. If somebody invested in me, I'm less
Mm-hmm.
likely to leave. So
Mm-hmm.
that increases the attrition. So I think we need more of that because I allude back to GM. I started when I was 19. I didn't get
Mm-hmm.
more money, but I never closed the opportunity to learn more.
Mm-hmm.
eventually it helped me as I moved on. But I mean, I was at the same pay, but not once when they brought something to me to learn, I was never with the mentality, oh, that's out of my job description, I don't want to learn it. I was just a sponge. But you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. I think that, and based off of your research, if they educate within, it's less likely for that individual to be so quick to leave because they feel like they've been invested into.
Most definitely. And that's the thing, I think most people honestly want to grow. They want to be
Yeah,
better people. They aspire to greater things. They want people to have higher expectations for them. And I think if you don't provide those opportunities, then you get what you get. You end up getting a person who's not going to work as hard, who's not going to do the extra or look for opportunities if you're not providing them or having the expectation that they are to grow. And you are placing value on any growth that they do inside of the organization as well as outside of the organization. And I think it's really important that employees find out who their employees actually are.
absolutely. It's you get what you give.
Mm-hmm.
If you're investing in your employees and your employees feel more part of a team, it's less likely again that they're going to leave. They're going to feel like they're a part of a company. They're going to feel like they affect the bottom line. If you make them feel like they are as important as you are, then it's less likely for them to feel like, oh, if I walk away, then I won't be of value. They won't miss me. Because that's what
Mm-hmm.
I hear from a lot of contract employees. Oh, I'm just another contract employee. But if you make them feel as if they're not just another contract employee, or whether it's contract or not, regular employee, and invest in them and train them, then that concept of staying and valuing them as you do your regular employees, I think you'll have a better employee and more loyal because that loyalty comes with that.
Most definitely. Okay, I want to pause a minute here because they're going to ask you a very important question. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Can you think about time as a professional where you had to decide as a person, as an individual, because of who you were, that regardless of your cultural environment and regardless of your place of work, that you wanted more, that you aspired for greatness?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was after I left GM.
Mm-hmm.
My first job that I had gotten right outside of GM. It was love the atmosphere, love the people, but I think I had outgrown the position. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't allow me. I felt like a flower that was closed up. It didn't allow me to blossom. I had nowhere to move.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very, very hard decision. I mean, with tears, because I'm a very naturally loyal person. And I felt like I would cripple the company had I left. But I had to realize that I was crippling myself by not leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So I was hindering myself, and I sat down with the owners and they understood.
Mm-hmm.
I told them, I said, okay, if I was your daughter, would you want me to remain? And they said no.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I was doing was looking out for them versus looking out for myself. And that
Mm-hmm.
was one of the hardest decisions that I've had to make from a career perspective because I
Mm-hmm.
really, really, truly, and we have a very good relationship right today. But
Yeah.
that was a very, very hard decision that I had to make in my career. But in order for me to advance and move and grow, I had to leave to get into an atmosphere where there was room to grow.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that anyone listening today, whether they are a business owner or employee, you've given them some seeds where they can grow.
Well, I hope
And
so.
yeah, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me and to share not only your personal experience, but also your professional experience, as well as I think you gave I think a great understanding. I'm sorry, a great, um, yeah, I think you provided a better understanding of what employees are experiencing as well as business owners. So I hope that people listening today have some things that they can take away and that will give them some pause to think about how they can be better employees as well as better business owners as well.
Absolutely. And thank you, Angela, for inviting me. I enjoyed the conversation.
You are so welcome. All right. So let me introduce. Thank you, Kim. Thank you so
You're
much. So
welcome. Thank
you're
you.
you're
Bye
welcome. Bye bye.
bye. Bye.
And so here we are. So let me tell you about my next guest, Chrissie Zavicar. She is the founder and CEO of LinkedIn Consulting, which works with businesses and influencers to generate visibility and leads on LinkedIn. She's also the acting chief marketing and communications officer for Team 84, a certified MBE holding company focused on technology, manufacturing, entrepreneurship, business solution staffing, and product creation, as well as the CEO and co-founder of First and Sober. So, Chrissie, welcome to Empowered. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Now it's interesting, Chrissie, because I had intended when I started the show to mention what we were talking about, and I don't know that I did when I did the introduction. And I, in my notes I have it. You're going to be talking about the Black experience from the white perspective.
Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah, right. Pressure.
Yeah.
And but I know that these discussions are important.
Mm-hmm.
Really important, and that's one thing that I think we definitely recognize with the pandemic, with these inequities that were identified, but also we definitely have to acknowledge that race was a significant part of the election, of the pandemic, and everything between.
100%.
Yeah. Now, what was interesting, and I also thought quite honorable, actually, was that you took it upon yourself to understand why Black Lives Matter, and you took it upon yourself to kind of understand the Black experience. And I recognized as you were sharing your interviews and your conversations on LinkedIn, you had the opportunity, you did this intentionally, you sought out different people to get their perspective of what it was like to be a Black person, in different situations. And so I want to give you the opportunity to talk about, what did you learn?
I will say too that honestly, the interviews themselves were wonderful. Just to have the experience and be able to speak to some amazing people who were willing to speak to me about their experience. And I think probably the biggest thing to start out with is the fact that everybody's experience is different. It's not like there's, I think sometimes there's this idea that there's a common perspective across the board when you're talking about race. And that's not the case at all. One person's experience as a Black woman is a different person's experience as a Black woman. And you would have one person state their perspective as one thing, and then I would speak to a different person and they had a very different perspective. So if anything, it was really, it was wonderful to get the spectrum of lived experience across a number of different people. So that was one thing. And just to see how some people, not only did they live the experience differently in terms of how they took it in, but their thought process on how to handle things or the way that they would say certain things. It was just very different with everybody. And so it was really wonderful just to get different perspectives from different people.
Interestingly, I remember a time when I had a conversation with my oldest son, Aaron, and we were talking about being a Black young man and what that meant. And I remember talking to him about how different his upbringing and his experience had been from, say, a Black kid that lives in Detroit or in Waterford or Flint or Pontiac or Auburn Hills or Rochester, essentially. Well, and it was interesting to see how he kind of, you could see he was thinking and trying to process, because quite honestly, all he's known is his experience. He hasn't had the opportunity to necessarily, even though he has friends that live all over, at the time, he had been kind of like in his bubble, and so his perception of things and his understanding of things and his experience is very different than a lot of other people. So when you talk about the different people that you had the opportunity to talk to, and one Black woman's experience was very different than this other's, how did hearing that and hearing the differences, how did it impact you?
Well, probably one of the biggest things that impacted me and my family is that, I was around the Michigan basketball program quite a bit. And the assistant coaches at the time, their children went to the same school district as my children. And the school district is very white. And there was an incident that happened with one of the coach's children where he was called a racial slur at school. And this kid is in the 5th grade. And his mom, who I love dearly, she's a wonderful person, and she went on Facebook Live just in tears. And she did so because she wanted to educate and explain to everyone what had happened so that they could be aware that this is happening in your school district, in your community. And what it did for me and how it impacted me is it became very important to me that I take the responsibility to educate my children. And their dad felt the exact same way, that, yes, there's the statement of we don't see color, but that's not really the intent.
Right.
The intent is that you do see color and you honor color and the differences that we have. And also that if you see something happening that is not okay, that you make sure that you are there for your friend or you are there for another individual. And so, I had my kids watch the video, not my youngest, but I had my older 2 children watch some of this video and help them understand this. And we've continued to, reiterate this point with them. So one of the bigger impacts that I had was how we are to teach our children how to see the situation.
That's interesting you say see the situation, because I have a lot of different friends, different racial backgrounds, different sexual orientations, even. Just I always say I'm multifaceted, and so are my friends. And I love it because I think that it's made me a better person. It's made me more appreciative of as I always say, the many different colors of people. It's made me more appreciative of what a person that's different from me, what they can add to my life, and how they can challenge me to grow in significant ways. And that's what I want to ask you. So as you were doing these interviews and you had the opportunity to hear the different experiences, the different perspectives, do you feel that you grew, and how did you grow?
Yes, I did. There's a number of different things I could speak to. I think the hardest thing is recognizing that real growth happens with difficulty. So growing just isn't like some happy-go-lucky experience that you get to feel all good by yourself and you move through and grow. Growth typically happens when you have to humble yourself, you have to be uncomfortable, you have to go through an experience that is not fun. Typically, that's where your growth edge happens, and that's where you get better. So for me, some of it was writing some of these pieces and because I always had people who loved me proof them. And I would have friends who loved me say, okay, so I know you don't mean this when you say this because I love you and I know your heart, but you can't say that.
Okay, right.
Or you shouldn't say that. And those are not fun experiences to have, because you'd like to think that, you know, I'm good, I'm decently, you know, I'm well-intentioned and XYZ, and you have to learn that the growth never stops. And that's it can be a non-fun experience. So just having to recognize that, you know, you can't just jump in and join in and be a part of a group that you're not a part of. You're not a part of the group. So you can be there as a friend, you can be there as, you know, just someone to, you know, to want to learn more and to want to engage, but you're not a part of a group you're not a part of. So, you know, I think that was a key piece for me to get through.
You know, and it's interesting because when I think about the different people that, you know, I'll say I have an intimate relationship with God. So I do think very deeply about the people that God brings into my life. Because one thing I say is that when I always say never ever minimize the importance of a cross path, because at any given time you could be somewhere else, but for some reason at the same time, God has placed you in a position to meet someone, to have a conversation, for your eyes to meet, you know, and I think that that's significant. And it's interesting that you talked about how much growth took place in these conversations, because I feel like that's why you have those opportunities to grow. And that's why different people that are very different from you, different, as I say, different races, different whatever, are brought into your life, because it is intended to be an opportunity for growth. Yeah. And unfortunately, I think that sometimes we're so busy looking at how someone's different from us, as opposed to like how they're different from us in a phenomenal way, in an appreciation, a valuable way, that we miss the importance and significance of that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think another thing is that really the responsibility piece of it, to know things that you didn't necessarily know. So I think that there's kind of there's a scapegoat sort of a way of like, oh, well, I didn't know that was happening. Oh, well, I didn't know that was happening. So if I didn't know it was happening, there's things that I was told that happened. And I was like, are you serious? That happens. Like that, how does that happen? How does anyone do that? Like when I would be told like, oh yeah, people ask me if they can touch my hair all the time. I'm like, are you serious? That is so intrusive. No, that happens all the time. I'm like, that is, you know, so I mean, just like the responsibility of needing to understand someone else's lived experience. And that isn't just a black and white thing, right? That's across all different nationalities and cultures. It made me look at holidays differently. It made me look at just the Americanized way of things, or the Christian way of things, or how just everything is very focused on one group. And it kind of shifted my lens a little bit, just to think about the fact that there's all these people living in a world that isn't, or a culture that isn't geared toward them, and what that must feel like to, you know, never see a baby doll on a shelf that has your skin color, or a Band-Aid that has your skin color, or, you know, just different things like that. And so just, what was that?
Undergarments.
Yes. Like just things that you don't think of, because, and it's recognizing that, oh, I never thought of that because it's all geared toward me. And so recognizing that white privilege that you didn't realize you had, which is the definition of it in and of itself. So, you know, I think trying to open your eyes a little bit more and see some of those things a little bit more was definitely, and knowing that it's just a starting process. Like you're not going to achieve everything because you say, okay, I'm ready, I'm going to do this. No, you're probably going to have some more humiliating situations. You're probably going to feel like an idiot. You're probably going to say something you shouldn't say. But you have to keep your mind open and keep learning and growing.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Now, it's something that you said that actually caught my attention. It made me pause a little bit, because, you know, growing up, I have to say, I didn't really recognize that Santa was white, and that all
Yeah.
the Christmas, shows were with white people. And when I got older, quite honestly, it wasn't until I got significantly older that I actually had it kind of like shoved in my face, quite honestly. And it was because I went from a predominantly white school that had a mixture of kids, but it was predominantly white. But in my personal life, like at home, we always had my mother always had friends of different races, and my friends were all that I played with were always different races. Excuse me. I didn't really see the difference until I went to a predominantly Black school, and because I didn't look as Black. I'll say it. I was picked on and called names. And so it was really challenging for me because here I was Black and I didn't really see the difference when I was here. And then I moved over here and all of a sudden I'm made to be different, but I'm saying to myself, but I'm just like you.
Right.
And why do you see me so different? We're living in the same neighborhood. We're going to the same school. We're having similar experiences, but you are looking at me as if I'm completely different from you. In your conversations with other Black people, did you have any conversations about that issue where you have Blacks that see themselves different from other Blacks because of the tone of their skin? Or maybe environment, because there's also a difference between sometimes if you're like a Black that lives in the suburb versus a Black that lives in the city. I'm just putting it out there. I'm being upfront.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's actually some really good conversations being had too on the LinkedIn platform. There's some really wonderful women on there that are having some dialogue that is putting it out there about the same thing. And someone posted about it recently. I want to make sure that I get her last name right. Her name is, I'm gonna have to find it, but they're just having some conversations about exactly that. And what it actually reminds me of is there's a video that it's relatively old. I don't know if you ever saw it, about the woman who was in the grocery store. Did you ever see that video?
I don't think so.
So it's basically where this woman's in the grocery store and her sister-in-law is there with her, but her sister-in-law is mixed race but looks white.
Okay.
And she is Black. And they're together. And her sister-in-law goes through, checks out all the groceries. Her name is Joyce something, but she checks out, everything's fine. Okay. Then this woman goes to check out. The first woman wrote a check, everything was fine. This woman goes to write a check, and the cashier, who's like strawberry hair, white, brings out the bad checkbook and is like, I need to see some ID.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And goes through this whole thing. And the woman had her daughter with her, and her daughter's getting frustrated, like, why aren't you saying something? And the woman is explaining in the video that, okay, so I can either say something and now I'm the angry Black woman, or I'm sitting here taking this and I have to show my daughter that I'm just going to let myself be treated this way. Well, her sister-in-law ended up speaking up and saying, why is it that why are you treating her differently than you're treating me? And she said, she didn't think she was. But yes, I mean, there's that idea of, you're talking about it in the flip context. That's the other context. But yes, I've heard it from both, where there's a difference based truly on the tone of your skin and what shade it is. And it's just it's just a very interesting thing to have to think through and recognize that it really does exist as a bias.
Now, one of the things that you said very earlier in our conversation is you said that you felt the responsibility to kind of educate your kids. So how did your conversations with these other women and other people change the conversations you were having with your kids?
The biggest thing that I was talking to my kids about was that concept of, yes, see difference. and having to explain that the world looks at kids differently or some people differently because of the color of their skin, which of course, as children, they don't understand that. Why would that be the case? And my kids have mixed race best friends, actually, believe it or not. And so they're just like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And so you actually have to explain to them that, well, some people might call them these names or think that they're not as good and it's your responsibility to stand up for those children and make sure that they're not alone or make sure that they're not left alone and that kind of a thing. Because one of the biggest things that stuck out to me from all those interviews that I did was the woman whose her husband coaches basketball. And she talked about the reality of not being able to let her son outside before sunrise to play basketball outside because it's not safe to send your Black son outdoors while it's dark in the suburbs. And that was just a very difficult thing to hear, that that's her reality. And she would get very emotional when she would talk about it. But the fact that she couldn't let her son outside either before the sun came up or after the sun went down because she didn't know, if he would be thought to be doing something he wasn't supposed to be or, something to that nature. So just having that perspective of just how the world doesn't look the same for every child and just trying to explain to my children how the world sees them and that their experience isn't going to be the same as all their friends and just how they're supposed to have some responsibility for that.
It makes me think about myself as a Black woman and a Black mother after Trayvon Martin and then Ahmaud Arbery, those two instances. And I have to say, I was scared. I was actually for the first time terrified for the safety of my children. And I had never experienced that before. And the thing that was so scary for me as a Black mother was because in both those situations, you had two young Black men who were not doing anything but running and going to the store. And it ultimately led to their deaths.
Yep.
Yeah. And in fact, I recall you commented on the video that I put up about Ahmaud Arbery, especially because that was especially challenging for me because, because he was doing something that brings so much joy to me, running. And I think about how that's such a peaceful thing to do and how important it is for me to be able to do that and feel free. And I know that space that you get into when you're running, when the weather's nice and you're out there just, living
your
life.
happy place.
You're your happy place.
Yeah.
And I can imagine, and how scary it would be to have two people that you don't know. Well, it was actually, more than two people, when you look at the whole situation in that particular case, surround you and you don't know the intent, of an individual. And it was the same situation with Trayvon. Is here you had a complete stranger coming up to you and you're reacting out of fear, out of, trying to fight for your survival. And for the first situation, there was no consequence for that, for his life being taken. Now, fortunately, there was a consequence for Ahmaud Arbery. Those individuals were brought to justice. So now with those conversations in mind, and I know that it's a kind of a different time frame, but how did your perspective prior to the conversation look at an experience like that, a situation like that, then afterwards look at a similar experience after having those conversations? Can you say it was different?
I think that what was different was my own feelings of responsibility for my own privilege that I have and enjoy. Because I think that, my eyes were first open to that idea of just being innocently yourself and not being allowed to be innocently yourself when I actually worked for the Detroit Lions, and I would get to know these players and they would tell me, like, for example, some of the most wonderful, nice guys, and they'd be like, yeah, I can't walk into a store with a hoodie on, I get trailed. And so me as a young 20 something, like, for the first time really starting to recognize that phenomenon would happen. I think after the conversations I had, it was more, you're not absolved from it. You do things that contribute to it as well. You enjoy the benefit of white privilege, whether you want to pretend you don't or not. That was, I think, that was the big change for me, was feeling like, I'm just as part of it. It's not like just because I don't agree with it, therefore I'm not a part of that group. No, there's plenty of privileges that I enjoyed just because of the color of my skin, whether I like it or not, or I do and I'm not aware of it, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of things that I have the ability to do. There's a bunch of podcasts that have come out, recently too about this. And one was, it was a mixed race couple, and the man was Black and the woman's white, and they got pulled over. And she was just irate because they shouldn't have been pulled over for whatever reason, or it was because of the way that the cop was treating the man, and he wasn't treating him very well. And she was just getting upset. And he's sitting here trying to get her to calm down because she doesn't understand. And the idea of not being able to voice frustration, voice anger, because your life is actually not safe to do so. Those types of things, recognizing those types of privileges, that I can say certain things, I can confront certain things without having to worry that I'm going to have a certain consequence. Whereas other people, if they do that, they absolutely have to worry about having a certain consequence. So I think those were the types of things that really came to light for me after digging into those conversations and hearing people's firsthand account and just really internalizing it more than I had previously.
Now, as you move forward, I know that you have a number of things that you do, things that are important to you. I've had the opportunity to talk to you about First and Sober. I've had the opportunity to see many of the things that you've done. Do you see yourself kind of continuing the conversation about race, just as you have continued conversations about other aspects of your life? Do you see yourself continuing to seek out the perspectives and gain an understanding of other people's experiences as it relates to race?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mentioned LinkedIn before, and there's a lot of really wonderful voices on LinkedIn. I love doing work around diversity and all of that. I think that I got to a place after doing all those articles that it was time for me to start listening and just really listen and just let myself shut up and just listen to people around me. So I'm really in this place of making sure that it's not about me in any stretch of the imagination, and that it's just about listening to others, celebrating others. And if I'm ultimately called to do something else with it that is more out there, then that's great. But for me right now, it's more about just continuing to learn and just appreciate other people.
Yeah. Well, as we started our conversation, I think, I talked about how I honestly believe that is why we have different people that are brought into our lives, because I would see those as opportunities for growth. I see those as opportunities to learn different perspectives, to understand that your view of the world is very different than someone else's, and that your experiences are very different than someone else, and they will impact you very differently. And if you're not going to open up your mind to hearing and listening, as you just said, that you've decided that you're really going to focus on, I think if you don't, you're going to remain isolated, and you may not be physically, but kind of isolated in your mind.
Yeah.
You know, and closed. And I think that that's a sad place to be, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Chrissie, so much for taking time out of your day to share your personal experience with me, and to share also your personal growth. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and not giving me any questions that, you know, are completely unanswerable.
I try not to do that to any of my guests. I try to always create a positive experience. So I hope that it was.
It was. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Chrissie. So, okay, we're going to introduce my next guest. Thank you, Chrissie. Take care. Well, let me tell you guys about my next guest. My next guest, Herman Moore, is the owner of Team 84, a certified minority-owned business holding company with core focus in technology, contact manufacturing, logistics, enterprise, printing, staffing, and marketing. He is also the founder of the Tackle Life Foundation, which provides essential life skills and experience to youth to assist in successful individual growth and development. Welcome to Empowered, Herman. How are you doing today?
Hey, I am great. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Oh, it's my joy. It's my true joy. Now, many people know you as a football player, but I know you beyond that, you know, beyond the football player. I know you as a business person. I know you also as an entrepreneur. I've seen the many challenges in all those arenas, and I've seen the way that you've had to adapt and adjust, but also the ways that you've created opportunities for other individuals to have other opportunities, and opportunities to adapt and adjust to the changing environment, the changing cultures, the changing, I would say, you know, when you think about business, there's so many different businesses, and there's so many different organizations and companies. And then you think about entrepreneurships, there's so many different ways that you can be entrepreneurial, you know, whether you're selling products or services, I mean, whether you're selling products or you're providing services, whatever it is that you're doing, there's so many different ways to do business. Now, of course, as a Black man, you have been able to, I think, see from that perspective other Black men and the challenges that they have faced as owners of organizations, as employees of companies, and as entrepreneurs. What would you like to say about entrepreneurship and also in employment? Because at one time you were an employee, you know, of the Detroit Lions, and then you were not. You know, you really stepped out into the entrepreneurial world and tried to develop opportunities for yourself. And now, from that same world, the entrepreneur world that you've created, now you're creating other opportunities for yourself. So I want to give you the opportunity to talk about that.
First and foremost, thanks again. I know we talk at times, but we don't get as in depth about some of the things that are just really moving at a fast pace. You know, the world has changed from where I grew up, coming from a small place in Danville, Virginia. We were afforded certain opportunities, but the walls were a little bit tighter. We couldn't see much further beyond them because the opportunities weren't flooded in through there. There were opportunities, certain working opportunities came from the housing project side of things in Danville, lower income housing. And so I was limited to really a lot of only what I could see, not as much as what I got to know later in life. And that it made a difference, because once those other things became open to me, I start to realize that there's a lot of opportunity, and all you have to do is apply yourself. And you have to have education, you have to have knowledge, you have to have opportunity. There's got to be equality and equitable opportunities for all. And I know you mentioned me, and we try not to do too much as it relates to color, but you can't ignore it, because as a person, that is something that, as much as I want to be blind to it at times and just say, hey, I'm not getting an opportunity because of that, there are some standards that are a little bit different. There are those that may be offended by that or may not see that and think that that's always a go-to card. But I'm telling you, even as a man who has had some success, I went to the University of Virginia, graduated there, went to the NFL, got to the apex of my professional sport, did very well there, excelled. And then after that, stayed very much embedded in the community. And after doing all that, it was still challenging to find opportunities other than what I would be able to pay for myself, or I was able to create for myself. It wasn't those that were coming looking for me. There weren't those that were coming to say, hey, because you have this experience, because you have this even educational background, and you have this professional acumen, we're going to give you an opportunity to support our organization or our company at a high level. I don't mean entry level, I mean high level, because I had the experience. Even when I tried to do coaching, I had to start so far at the bottom after being at such a high level that none of it ever made sense. So there's this thing we have to get away from, and that is providing opportunity to those who want it. And then also, how do we balance it, Angela, and give opportunity to those who don't have the ability to be in front of it as often? We have to balance it out. A lot of people may think that too often minorities are given more opportunities than others. That's not the case. We're being given more opportunities than we were being given in the past. And because of that just means that we're being given more opportunity. It doesn't mean that someone else is having opportunities taken away. So that's really what my entrepreneurship spirit is about. That's really what my goals and initiatives are as a company. And those are still some of the barriers I have to break down as an African American and a minority business owner.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, one of the things that I've definitely recognized is that you have talked about the entrepreneurial spirit. And in our past conversations, you have talked about how that was kind of motivated by seeing the entrepreneur spirits of those people around you. Now, something that you said that was really interesting at the very beginning, you said that, initially and I'm paraphrasing, you hadn't really been exposed or seen certain things, and there were limited opportunities. And so, and then you said then later in life, you were able to see more and you were able to get more opportunities. And I think about those individuals that don't see more, don't see higher, don't see greater, and aren't provided with better opportunities. And yet they are just as talented. They have these amazing characteristics that in the right environment, if nurtured and valued, they would bloom just like any other person would bloom in that situation. So,
right.
Yeah, would you like to comment on what I'm saying?
No, what I was going to say, and I'm glad you brought up that point. I use it like this, and the way I'll equate it, and the analogy I'll give Angela is this. So imagine you hear about, let's say in certain areas, these rap artists or certain people were selling things out of their car, or they're doing yard sales, or they're doing certain commerce, but it seems as though it's looked upon as being this lesser thing, right? They're not doing it with a storefront. They're not doing it with a big box retailer. They're not doing it in some front-facing storefront and consumer, entry and all this other stuff. But the difference is it's the exact same thing. It's the exposure. The person who's selling it out of their car or doing commerce out of their yard as a yard sale, if they're given the tools and they're given the access to say, here's how you elevate to the next level to being a physical owner of a shop. You use those same tools that you have, but we're going to expand on that because you're going to need some other infrastructure. You need some other systems. Again, it's the exposure. It's the exact same thing. The determination is there. The will to do it is there. The innovation is there. The determination and the commitment is there, right? You have all those things that are needed and necessary to be successful as an entrepreneur. But they're lacking the ability to understand when you move up these different levels, what tools are you needed to be afforded. You know, there's finance, there's fulfillment, there's the ability to scale, so you can give it, if your product is something that is well received, you have to be able to expand that. Well, all that is giving someone an opportunity, is educating them, is giving them tools and support. And that's all. That's all I'm looking for as an entrepreneur. I'm going, okay, we have infrastructure, we have access, we have the ability to help educate and do all these things. Then that's really what our program is about. And that's when I talk about the entrepreneurial spirit. That's really how I kind of give you that analogy to say it's all one and the same. It's just you're being afforded just the opportunity to have the expansion of growth.
Now you've kind of alluded to your entrepreneurship program is what you're kind of talking about, because I do understand that is what you do. You're providing opportunities for someone to scale, someone to grow their business, someone to get the things that they need to take it to the storefront, to take it, you know, on a large scale to more consumers. Tell us about your entrepreneurship program, if you can, in greater detail.
Yeah, so with the entrepreneurship program, it always starts with more than one. I can't do it by myself. I take the services and the solutions that we have as a business entity, and that is we have staffing. So we understand people, and we understand the habits. We understand what the industry looks like and what people are looking for. The next part we have is the ability with our entrepreneurship program is to have commodities and to have manufacturing. So our contract manufacturing is really the base, the heart and soul of what we do. And then the other component we put to that is branding and marketing. And that encompasses everything from photography to videography, your social presence, and how you start to develop value and brand awareness. So when you combine all of those elements, and then the most important is the financial side of it, but we try to alleviate some of that by providing resources that we leverage that will not put an impact or a burden or a source of friction for those new business owners or those looking to get into the field. And we just educate them, and we figure out what they're passionate about in our particular field, which is contract manufacturing. So we do about 30 different SKUs within our product line. We can do everything from personal care products. So that's your men's grooming, your women facial creams, soaps, lotions, and body balms, all those things. We can do all those things. We also can create pet care products. We also have the ability to do cleaning products. So all natural or organic cleaning solutions for countertops and floors and general cleaning around your home. To car care kits, so your interior cleaning, for your carpet shampoos. So there's a wide range of products that we can create, and we create those with their branding in mind, something that they can feel good about getting behind. And to be honest, the whole program behind it that we're looking to do with the entrepreneurship program is how do we scale these opportunities? How do we uncover some of these really talented people who are having to do it from their homes? They're having to do it from places where wherever they can get access, but we want to do it at a much larger professional level. And Angela, I'll tell you, one of the things that drove me to do this was I went and I started talking to some of the retailers, and we were trying to get in on their shelf space. The number one thing I kept hearing was the lack of quality and sustainability and deliverable from the minority vendors that they were working with. They had crooked labels. The product sometimes was inconsistent. They couldn't get enough of it on the shelves if it did catch fire and they needed the demand. They didn't have the sophistication of the systems to tie into their databases or their systems to be able to get it to their distribution centers. So they didn't have logistics and fulfillment. We step in and we provide all of that internally. This isn't something that we outsource to another company. We're able to secure their products, their raw goods, their packaging, their labels, their print, their warehousing, the whole nine, front to back. And we thought this would be a great program for us to start to partner with those larger retailers and start to say, we can help those that you really are trying to give these opportunities to put their best foot forward. And that's what this entrepreneurship program is all about, is taking those who already have an idea, and we're just helping to become that strategic partner that helps them be even more successful.
Well, because it's interesting. As they say, a lot of, businesses fail, but a lot of people fail, quite honestly, because they don't have support, because they don't have all those different things that you mentioned that you provide through the entrepreneurship program. But what they do have is they do have talent. They do have the mindset, to want to develop a product and to know and to develop a brand. Quite honestly, as you mentioned, they're just doing things at a smaller scale.
Yeah, I love branding.
hmm Yeah. Well, the thing is that's so interesting is that, if you have a particular product and you don't have the opportunity to scale it, then it's just one of many products that sits, and you have to have, as you say, our infrastructure. You have to have the marketing and the fulfillment, the ability to, if your product takes off and people want to buy that product, you have to be able to provide it. And then I think you also have to be able to have the opportunity to grow beyond your products. Is oftentimes once you start with one product, it builds into others. And having a system and a structure as well as a support system that's going to support that growth, it's going to allow you to have long-term growth, not just short-term. And I really applaud you for not only recognizing what's needed to help people be successful, but also making it available to those individuals that, if not for this type program, would not have the opportunity to bring their product, to a large scale, so that other people can value it and appreciate it just as much as the person that created it.
No, I appreciate that, and that's really our goal. That's our purpose, is to, again, try and not level the playing field, but just open it up so that those that need support, we know where they are and we know where they reside, which makes it even that much more engaging for us. There's firsthand understanding and knowledge of some of those challenges that are there, so getting to the solutions a lot easier. And I think because we have the ability to bridge the gap and also become advocates for those young budding entrepreneurs in those other spaces where we do have traction in some of the retailer spaces. But, online has really balanced it out to where doing e-com allows them to take really a brand globally, as long as they're willing to stay with it. I mean, everything's not going to work. Some things are going to fail. And it's all about the lessons we learn along the way, and then having the ability to be forgiven by your partner. And that is where we step in and say, hey, we'll help you try and see if we can get it right. And if something doesn't work, can we pivot? And maybe there's something else we can do. And if it turns out not to be the case, but at least you tried and you gave your idea or your innovation a chance. And that's all I want to be able to provide. For us is nothing. We win only if we're able to help them be successful in what they do. And that's also another thing that makes us a great strategic alliance with the individuals and the groups that will be a part of our entrepreneur program.
Well, when I started the conversation with you, one of the things that I talked about was the challenges and obstacles of entrepreneurship. And I think that, unfortunately, sometimes as an entrepreneur, when you step out and you produce a product or you provide a service, you forget that everything's not going to be okay, that there are going to be mistakes made. There are going to be times when you have to pivot, as you mentioned. There are going to be times when maybe a particular product that you are providing needs to be evolved or changed or altered. I think having someone that has been there, done that, be able to say, this is part of the process. This is part of being an entrepreneur. This is part of having a business. This is part of having products that you're trying to sell on a large scale. That as your products evolve, as your brand evolves, tweaks are going to have to be made. Changes are going to have to be made. Something that you originally thought was a good idea may shift and change based on the changing environment and demand for that product or service. And so I would like to ask you, for those people that you worked with already, what has it meant to them that they maybe articulated to you to be able to catch them maybe when they fall back or step back a few steps, to be able to have someone there say, wait a minute, this is part of the process. This is what you need to do to get you back on track.
I'll give you two scenarios. There are two young ladies that we've been working with and that we've helped them launch their products and their brand. One was for baked goods, and it was out of state. It wasn't in the state of Michigan where I'm located. And they needed branding. They needed a presence. They needed a voice. They needed an identity. And for us, our team stepped in and we started to understand what we need to do on social. What did we need to do in terms of presenting them in a more professional way and giving them just some small tools, from everything from guest receipts to coming up with other creative that they could use throughout different advertising campaigns and things of that nature that go sometimes unchecked, or they're an afterthought. So we try and get them to know that there's all about the planning phase. It's about presenting and coming up with ideas that you can measure, coming up with campaigns that you start to track the analytics on, and you start to find out what do customers really resonate with as it relates to your product or your brand. What do you need to do more of and less of? So when we removed that anxiety and we brought that confidence, it's amazing how they focused even more when they knew they were getting it right versus they were just throwing things out there to see what sells. There was waste, and then they could start to eliminate waste. They start to run leaner business. And this is just things that will naturally occur that they're learning along the process. And that's because we stay hands-on. Most people will just give individuals money and then they step outside and say, hey, good luck. I hope everything goes well. Those are the ones that mainly fail. If you're committed to those type of programs, if you're going to give a company X thousands of dollars, I think it's important that you stay on board and you provide them additional resources, even if it's mentorship, that goes even further sometimes than the money, that gives them that sustainability, but also builds even more confidence. There was also another lady who had a pet care line. She'd been going out and she's doing tons of work on the road. She goes to several shows, but at the end of it, it was, how does she get traction? How does she look bigger now that she has a global retailer saying, hey, we'd love to put your product in our store? Anxiety kicks in. And the anxiety kicks in because how do you scale that? You no longer can make 500 units. You now need to make 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. And you now have to distribute that to multiple locations or distribution centers, or you lose the opportunity. We step in, we do that, we help out. We now let them do that with confidence, but now they grow and they realize, you know what, they could do this all along. It's the opportunity, it's the exposure. And that is the part that I think resonates and is really heartfelt between our company, our team members, all those that get involved with it. And first and forehand, I've tried a million things. Not all of them will work. All right. But it is, I have the ability to have the resilience. And sometimes that is by the financial security, or it may be because of the network or the relationships. What about those that only get one and they're done? We try not to make it that. So that's the glory, the beautiful part of it that really excites me about what we do, is the ability to make a better person come out of it and to give them the ability to do what they want to do. And it's not to pull them out of the regular workforce, but it's to give them options of how they can provide for themselves.
Now, it's interesting. You said pull them out of the workforce, because I think one thing that we sometimes don't recognize is that depending on your financial situation, you may be an entrepreneur, but also working. So you are an employee and also a person who's trying to, bring a product or service, to the mass. And I imagine that can be very challenging at times.
Yeah, think of this as well, Angela. It can be counterintuitive because here we're a staffing firm, as you know, and we're trying to find people. So if we're creating entrepreneurs, we don't have, it would seem to people who are looking at it in a shallow light that we're pulling people away from businesses that need them as employees. But no, we're creating job owners who then will grow and create more jobs. And that will provide maybe a way to do business back with the company they left from, and they become a vendor for that company. It's all about the mindset. And that's what is so twisted about what's going on in our world, is that we look at it so traditional. We don't realize that, there may be a greater good that comes out of the work that we do if you're willing to put yourself in that direction.
That's interesting that you say if you're willing to put yourself in that direction. What did you mean by that?
Well, you get some that it's from a selfish place. Well, I need those employees. I don't want them to be in a better place because I need them to help me be better as a company. But sometimes you just gotta be supportive and show that, you know what, I'm gonna give you the opportunities here that one that make you not want to leave. That's one. And that's what we try and tell some of the people that we staff for. You know, you got to make it an environment that screams, you know what, you belong. You're a part of this. And, you know, when we win, you win. If you make it all about here's a job, do what we tell you to do, or we'll go find someone else to do it, then that can change the attitude of making someone be a valuable and valued employee versus and team member versus just saying, you know what, I'll go do better on my own and I'll take those chances and those risks. But at the end of the day, we're all afforded opportunity. We're all afforded the ability to make certain decisions that are best for us. As a company, we'll continue to work with people to be self-sufficient and energize them to be independent. But on the other side, we will continue to push those who are looking to get into the workforce and try and find opportunities by working to make the environment. We work closer with our clients to try and say, please make sure this is a good place. We're sending the people that we go find for you. And we're not just there to dump bodies, you know, over with your business and say, hey, we're glad we got you an employee and then we move on. So entrepreneurship is essential. It's a huge part of our economy. It's a huge part of self-fulfillment at some point. So it's something that I think we need to continue to nurture. I think it's something that will continue to make our communities better, and it gives great balance to our workforce.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I've said kind of actually a few times actually in my earlier interviews with the guests that I've talked with today is that people are multidimensional. You know, they're multifaceted. I always say we have very many different colors. And I think as an organization and a company, you really need to know the many different colors and different, dimensions of your employees, because chances are what they aspire to do outside of their work environment can be ironically a benefit to your organization if you're aware of those things that they're doing. And I think that as a company or organization, and especially I think more so now, because I think during the pandemic people identified those things of those many different different things about themselves. They recognized that they were talented in many different ways. Some of them did step out and do some side hustles, or or create some other opportunities for themselves because they had to. So they recognize much more about themselves than they actually knew. And so I think as a company and organization, you have to think about that as these people are coming back to your company or organization, as well as the people that you are bringing on that are new, that you don't know. I think it's really important that you assess and evaluate who these people are, what are their goals, what do they aspire to do, what areas of growth are they looking for, and how can you help them? Quite honestly, I think if you do that, what you'll find is not only do you help your employees grow, you'll find that your organization grows as well.
Yeah, it's one thing I don't think people look at. You can have the entrepreneurship and you can have an entrepreneurial spirit inside of your business. Now I want you to put you wrap your mind around it. People think sometimes that's external. Here at Team 84, we encourage our employees, if they have ideas, that we'll look as a company to team up with them. And that allows them to take something they're passionate about, and we try and see if that's an opportunity for us to become business partners or get behind it. It is important to be able to do that. And you make great points on that, Angela, that there's things that can be nurtured and be done from within that creates just a whole totally different person. It creates a different mentality, a workplace of empowerment. And if you can get that, then it will lead you down a path of success. I think it makes for a better culture and also a tolerance when it comes to people. Final thing I will say to that other piece that I didn't mention is very important. In part of the entrepreneurship spirit and part of our program, we make sure that everyone understands there's a philanthropic piece that they need to make sure is a part of every component that they do as a company. Have a touch point with their community and be somewhere where they're giving back to something or reaching back to make sure that someone else has an opportunity, or they're supporting those that may need their help based on the work that they've been able to do. So that's a big component of every program that we create.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very important from a company perspective as well from a personal perspective. I think you need to, as an individual, think outside yourself, think about what you can contribute to the world, and not just what people can contribute to you. So thank you so much for making that a significant part of your organization, and also mentioning that to those that are listening tonight, because it's something that we all, I think, need to think about. Quite honestly. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me. I really appreciate all that you do. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the entrepreneurs that participate in the entrepreneurship program. I'm very excited to see how they grow and how the entrepreneurship grows as well.
Thank you. And we look forward to continuing to work with you. And thank you for your continued support and all that you've helped us do as well. We really appreciate you.
You're welcome. All right, you guys. So I'm going to move on to my next interview. Thank you, Herman.
Thank you.
So let me tell you about my last guest, Dr. Cleamon, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly, President and CEO of American Advantage Home Healthcare. He is a transformative, energetic, visionary leader with 25 years of experience in multiple industries and sectors: automotive, consulting, healthcare, higher education, telecommunications, social entrepreneurship, not-for-profit leadership, and community development. Welcome, Dr. Moorer. How are you doing today?
I'm well tonight, Angela. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. So I actually had the opportunity to visit your website, and I have to say I was very impressed with not only what you do through American Advantage Home Healthcare, but also your efforts to educate people.
Yes.
Yeah, I really admire that. So tell me about American Advantage Home Healthcare, and then I want to talk about the efforts that you have implemented to educate people as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Angela. Well, American Advantage Home Care was founded in 2012 in Dearborn, Michigan, with the primary goal of providing skilled home healthcare services for homebound patients that were referred by community doctors. So initially, the original founders developed the agency to support Muslim and Arabic patients in Dearborn.
Okay.
So close to 3 years ago, June 5th, 2019, my wife and I, Nicole, we acquired the agency with the intent on growing it to provide skilled home healthcare services for Detroiters, as well as patients in other communities. So over the last 3 years, we've grown tremendously from a small agency that had a homebound census of about 13 patients to now an active census of close to 200 patients. So we serve thousands of patients each year, providing physical therapy, occupational therapy, medical social work, skilled nursing, and certified nursing aides to help out patients. And we send in doctors in the event that a patient does not have a primary care physician.
I see. Now, what's interesting, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but I interview many different companies and organizations, foundations, charities. And what's really interesting is what I recognize about those organizations, those nonprofits, those charities, those people and organizations that really cater to the needs of the community, is they have evolved as the needs of their patients, their clients, have evolved, and as their needs have grown, and also the needs of the community. You mentioned a number of services that you provide. How have you grown over the years, and what was the motivation for that growth?
Okay, so I'll say, Angela, in terms of how we've grown, right? We grew in the diversity of our patients. So having a intentful focus and being purposeful about reaching homebound Detroiters. So there are about roughly 40,000 homebound patients in Detroit out of the 600 plus thousand citizens within Detroit city limits. So we got really
a significant amount.
It is, right? It's a significant group of individuals who have a chronic illness that puts them in a homebound status or at a homebound status. So the how is greatly tied to our ability to reach out to local hospitals, the Henry Ford Hospital, Sinai Grace. So diving into the DMCs and saying, we want to serve patients that a lot of agencies overlook. And we want to provide support to hospital home health care agencies that have a shortfall of clinicians. So I want to say growing the patient census by imparting, a sensitivity to cultural diversity, being aware of that, and also looking at our staff, identifying staff members who live and work in the communities that they wish to serve. So I think those were two very important drivers. And then, Angela, to your second question, the motivation. The motivation to create a sense of urgency around health and wellness. So when you think about the number of unnecessary hospital readmissions or the lack of an ecosystem that supports health and wellness for families, we were motivated to break that. That if we could get in front of people with some preventative measures or provide support to caregivers who are in the home that may feel as though, hey, I got some hereditary and some genetic factors that I can't reverse. So if mom or dad has diabetes, then I'm going to have diabetes, hypertension also, right? And high blood pressure. So we felt like if we could get in front of people and provide them with understanding about what could be modified, what are those modifiable genetic factors and what are those comorbidities that can, be managed better prior to going to hospitals and urgent care, we would be able to have a value add in the industry and then perhaps somewhat of a competitive advantage ultimately.
Two things came up, and the first of which you mentioned diversity. And one of the things that you're probably aware of, but those listening may not be, is that oftentimes, especially as it relates to the medical and mental health field, there is unfortunately unrepresentation of people in certain communities that look like the people that they're serving.
Yes.
And it sounds like that's something that you recognize. You talked about diversity and recognizing that, for certain populations, that it would be nice if the caretaker, the person providing the support and the service, looks like the people that they're providing the service to.
Yes.
And yes. I want to actually let you speak on that first, and then I want to talk to you about the health and wellness component, about the preventative strategies that you've implemented.
Okay, yes. So looking like and resonating, I think the resonance creates a greater sense of trust. So it's one thing to say that if you're Spanish speaking or if you're Arabic speaking, perhaps you'll be better served by someone that also speaks your language, right? I do believe that there is certainly some truth to that as you try to overcome linguistical challenges and the context of, hey, here's your exercise regimen. I'm your physical therapist. I know you're 80 years old. You may be hard of hearing. So having the same tongue and dialect is certainly true. I would say in Black communities, communities of color, I add that a caregiver or a clinician who is non-biased and non-judgmental allows the patient and their family to have a greater sense of security or a greater sense of openness. Because, Angela, it takes a lot to let people come into your house.
Most definitely, yeah.
So if you come in and you're saying, I'm a medical social worker and I want to help you work through some challenges and problems, perhaps the best pronoun is we. We're
Mhm.
going to work together on tactics and strategies for you. So um, if we could get clinicians that are of a different race and different ethnicity to also work and speak from the perspective of we and what we can do together and collectively to help patients, that becomes the advantage that America has, being
Mhm.
diverse but uniform in the same direction of trying to instill health and wellness.
Most definitely. Well, you said something very important is, you are allowing someone to come into your home. Yeah,
Yes.
and depending on the service that you're providing, they may also be seeing you in very vulnerable positions. You
Yes,
know, yes,
absolutely. So when you think of bathing, for example,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And the gender differences, right? And the preference for a female patient that says, hey, you better make sure that is a female certified nursing assistant that's coming in here to bathe me, right?
Most definitely.
Indeed. So being cognizant as well as sensitive to those needs and preferences is very important.
Most definitely, most definitely. And when you think about it too, not only are you letting in someone in your home, but you're also sharing your illness, your whatever it is that you are dealing with at the time that's warrants this care. You're sharing it with someone, and it needs to be we,
Yes.
quite honestly, because otherwise you feel like it's my experience and you're not aware of my experience and the challenges of that experience, and how can you possibly help me?
Exactly. Exactly. Right. So tearing down or tearing down some of those walls on the front end, because if patients can trust you and they like you and they know of you, it increases their chance of cooperating and being compliant with you. So once they go back to their primary care physician and the PCP asks, how's the healthcare coming along? How's the PT and occupational therapy going in your home setting? You want that patient to be able to give the doctor a favorable response to how things are going.
Now, interestingly, you talked about preventative, and I am a big advocate of
Yes,
prevention.
you are. Yes, you are.
If you read anything about me or listened to anything I read, any articles that I've written, that is, my thing. Because oftentimes, especially in certain communities, there's an assumption, like, they call it generational curses, or they'll say, well, as you mentioned, my grandmother, my grandfather had diabetes, so therefore I will have diabetes.
Yes.
I will have high blood pressure. When the reality is no, what's happening is you're eating the same food that
Yes.
grandpa ate, and
Uh-huh.
you're not
Yep.
exercising because those weren't the behaviors that were modeled for you, nor were you provided those nutrient dense, low calorie foods. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so I recognize, as I mentioned earlier, that you've done a really good job, and I think you've taken the responsibility of understanding the importance of education, because education helps prevention. It leads to prevention. Where there is no
Yes.
education, there's really no opportunity for prevention. So I want to give you the opportunity. At what point did you recognize that you need to educate as well as serve?
Okay. Well, Angela, that's a really good question. I'm so glad that you asked it. Being a former dean, I was a business school dean and have been involved in higher education as a prof and an administrator for about 20 years, and transitioning into more of a for-profit business, in terms of health and wellness. I really wanted to focus on the drivers. It's unfortunately, healthcare will be sustainable as long as people are sick. It's a sustainable business venture, right? But in terms of the sustainability of a person's life, a person's sustainability is based upon their wellness, and interventions as well as some preventions. Those are some real big drivers. So I thought about it, right? I thought about it from the perspective of, when does a person first learn about diabetes, or hypertension, even the various cancers? And unfortunately, we learn about them most often whenever they affect someone very close to us, or when we're given a diagnosis, right? And so the panic and the anxiety and the angst that conjoin both of those situations, a loved one suffering from it and you being diagnosed with it, all bets are off in many cases on, now let me be informed, let me learn as much as I possibly can. Oftentimes we go into survival mode and it's fight or flight. So my thoughts were, what if we could start having very difficult conversations early on by exposing patients and their loved ones and the community to healthcare experts and specialists that just talk about heart health, and it's not anecdotal like, hey, John died of the Widowmaker, right? Let's have those heart health conversations as early as possible, right? Let's have men's health conversations where we overcome some of the reluctance that men have about getting their prostates checked, right? Where they, in their head, they got this vision of a glove and lube and they run from it. Nope. Let's let's tone down some of that fear. Let's tone down some of that anxiety and have some straight talk and some real talk. And try to create a sense of urgency around getting more aware and more comfortable with some of these difficult topics, Angela.
Well, it's those topics, those awkward topics of discussion, that really has contributed to me doing the show, which I've done now for over 4 years, over 300 guests later.
Wow.
And what's amazing is that, quite honestly, I was told along the way that, perhaps if I did my show about this or that, I would get more listeners or more followers. But I have felt like it was my responsibility, especially as a medical professional, especially as a integrative health expert, especially as a health professional, that is my responsibility to educate and to provide resources so that you can, and tools so that you can make healthier decisions throughout your life. And so I have made it my responsibility to interview, to interview medical and mental health professionals, to interview those people, those that owns those companies and organizations that are impacting their communities in impactful ways, and to provide just tips for health and wellness, tips for better overall health, better longevity, all of that, better well-being.
Absolutely.
It's my responsibility. So from a fellow educator to another educator, thank you for taking it.
My pleasure, Angela. You have done a wonderful job of doing that, and we need more of it. More of the conversations that lead to action. To say, and in a homebound environment, our goal is to bring more resources to the home of patients where they're most comfortable and where some of their bad habits, continue to perpetuate, So we want to disrupt some of that just a little bit,
Well, I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Sophia Mariva of the University of Michigan Rogel Cancer Center.
Yes.
And I remember something that she said that was really transformative to me. She talked about how with these cancer patients, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, she said that the efforts that she tries to get her patients, or those people that turn to her that are suffering from breast cancer, to implement in their life so that they have a better outcome, and hopefully that they can beat cancer.
Yes.
She said, are those lifestyle strategies that you would implement anyway? And the reality is one of the things that she talked about was that, as we live and as we live longer, it's important that we be able to live well, to live better.
Yes.
Because if you are in such a state that you're incapacitated, it's not only difficult for you, but it's also difficult for your loved ones. And so why you may get a diagnosis and why you may need the home health care, I think it's important that you're able to implement and integrate into your day things that will allow you to, after that diagnosis, to have a better outcome than you would have without that information, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense. It really does. Equipping and informing as well as encouraging. I think that's another piece that, Angela, your show does for so many listeners, to be able to encourage a mindset for better outcomes, as to say, fast food, there's nothing faster than peeling a banana. I mean, it's
right.
Really
it's very easy. You're just taking an apple and
done, right? Popping some cashews, taking fish oil pills in the morning, nothing much faster than that. So, changing those mindsets, encouraging people. And then we at American Advantage, we encourage our caregivers to go into homes and speak positively. Speak positively. We have patient liaisons that call our homebound patients and speak to them weekly, and then we do acts of kindness, where we know that patient that's homebound needs a fruit basket from time to time. And, we ask our, clinicians who's of the most need at this time. And as an owner, I hand deliver the baskets. I think encouraging, motivating, and inspiring individuals is just as equally as important to providing physical care and physical health, because if we could give them some mental and emotional stimulation, that goes hand in hand with some of those physical activities.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yes.
Well, what's interesting is knowing that is why I created my business and organization, and why I as I sought to educate myself, I realized that to just be a trainer, as I was for many years, or to just be a licensed therapist, as I have been, or a nutrition, specialist, that it can't be in isolation. It all works together.
Yes.
And you really do have to. I just say this: you're really doing a disservice to an individual if you're only looking at their individual situation as it presents itself. If you don't look at their situation and say, okay, how can I really help you? How can I help you get better in all the aspects of your life? Your eating, your physical activity, your relationships, even.
That's it. And we have to be holistic. I think even when you think about in an industry such as the financial sector, for that personal banker, right? When a member walks into a branch, it's more than a conversation about your checking account, right? There tends to be a broader conversation about financial wellness. So our greatest asset in many cases is our health. It's our health and the relationships that we're able to form. So we should be as holistically minded about ourselves and the well-being of our loved ones and those we are responsible for, as we are about our finances, for sure.
It's interesting that you said that, because it's funny. I've interviewed Kristen Holt and Amari Hall from Green Path.
Yes.
And and they provide the financial support, as well as financial education and resources. And it's funny, because you're right. Quite honestly, when someone is getting help with their financial, they'll say, well, I only want you to help me with this one thing.
Right.
And it's funny, and you think about that in many different areas, and we do that. We were expecting like this kind of holistic approach, but when it comes to our health, we don't do that.
No, because I think we still want happy hour. I totally get that. We still want those buttered pretzels and that beverage of choice, but in moderation. How about that, right? And making sure that when you get those wings, you also eat the celery and the carrots. Okay, the parsley isn't just
France now.
That's right. It's not just different decoration. No, you eat that celery too. No one ever asked for more of that. Hey, give me some more celery. No, hey, give me more wings. So we gotta create that balance for sure.
Most definitely. Create the balance.
Yes, for sure, absolutely, and not scope people, but kind of provide a roadmap. And then where there are the food deserts, throughout Metro Detroit, I am so glad, Angela, that there is, Gleaners and there's Forgotten Harvest. And there are groups now and food pantries and even mobile pantries like the SNAP food program that provides boxes on Tuesdays at Durfee Innovation Society to folks on the West Side. And there are so many groups that are helping with nutrition and trying their best to provide homebound and as well as low income families in Detroit with resources. So those partnerships and the collaboration, it's going to take all of us. It really will.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting, and we have a few minutes before the segment ends. You talked about partnerships, and that's another thing that I recognize about the many different organizations that I've had the opportunity to interview, especially those that have had longevity and they've had significant impact within a community. I know it has to be because of partnerships. How significant have partnerships been to your success?
Tremendously. Success is never achieved alone. Never. So even in view of your previous guests on the segment tonight, right? When you think about the ecosystem of a healthcare organization where you have to have medical supplies, you need transportation for patients from time to time, even the homebound patients who have to get to doctor's offices and appointments. When I think about billing, right, and the payers, the insurance providers, the network of physicians who refer their patients and sign your orders, marketing and outreach and public relations, you have to have a grand schema, a grand strategy in terms of identifying like-minded individuals who are mission-driven. I think when people talk about marketing, they say, hey, marketing is everything. Angela, I think mission is everything. I think mission is certainly everything, right? Because mission will bring like-minded groups together to carry out goals as well as to fulfill a vision. So partnerships and collaboration is essential. So it goes back to my we discussion, right? Whenever your company receives awards or recognition, being able to say, we give God the glory. We give our teams the credit, and we give our patients the love. It's imperative, no doubt about it. When the pandemic hit and we needed PPE, we needed the gloves, we needed gowns, we needed masks. Had I not had the relationship that I had with Medline and McKesson, it would have been very difficult to get those items, right? When we needed to raise awareness that our organization is Black-owned and it provides care to patients all throughout Metro Detroit, in Black communities, white communities, Hispanic, and Arabic communities, being able to partner with Publicom as a PR organization to help get that word out about us and the work that we were doing, it's essential. You have to line up and collaborate with individuals because success is never achieved nor sustained alone.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me, and hopefully now we can form a partnership You know,
It's done. Angela, we want you on the Home Healthcare Today show next month for Nutrition Month. March is National Nutrition Month, so we're going to be trying to reel you in for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And by that, what I mean too, but I'm happy to do that for you, but also as a partnership. You know, once we've made this connection, which we have, you know, we're connected for a reason, and I think if not for the fact that we were going to be, you know, committed to continue to educate as well as serve, we're going to continue to do that. And now we're doing it kind of collectively. So it's been nice to talk with you.
Likewise, Angela, I'm looking at the screen and I see more and more to come. It's just there. It just played out just like that. Thank you so much for having me, Angela.
Well, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we will talk again, okay?
We certainly will. Thank you, ma'am. Have a great night.
Good night. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, God bless.